I really like the Gamecube controller. It's unique, comfortable, and probably the best way to play my favorite game, Super Smash Bros. These are the words that I used at the beginning of my very first video, the Gamecube Elite Controller. It was a project about adding the magnetic sticks and D-pad of an Xbox Elite controller to a Gamecube controller, painting the buttons to better fit the new look and trying to add some functionality, which was a detachable cable working with an USB-C port. The video got a lot of attention and many people really liked both the video and the controller. However, I also got many comments, some rude and some not, then pointed out some flaws. First of all, the holes for the D-pad and the USB port were rough, to say the least. I really didn't care back then, but now I see that they really aren't that pretty. Then, even though nobody pointed this out, the paint on the buttons chips out with usage. And last but not least, the USB connection was completely pointless, since it didn't add any functionality despite being able to detach the cable and was completely unnecessary. So, a couple of months ago, I decided to upgrade my tools, buy some parts and try the project again. This is the new concept. The new Gamecube Elite Controller will feature the same sticks and D-pad as the previous model, and also the Model U board that gives the controller an USB port that can be used with a custom Gamecube to USB-C cable. However, this time the holes will be cut more precisely, and the USB-C port will have some cool features that we will see later. Talking about functionality, I think that it will be cool to add a second Z button on the left side, and make both the new and the old Z button clicky tactile buttons to improve feeling and performance. Before I start, I want to explain why I'm not using a fob. I have little to no clue about how to build it will cost way more and, most importantly, I would have no idea on how to do half the stuff that I'm going to do in this video. Also, one last thing, even though I'm gonna explain what I'm going to do, this is not a tutorial. If you're trying this project and need some additional help or information, feel free to contact me and I'll try to help the best I can. Anyways, I think we are set, let's begin. I'll start by opening the controller and giving it a good clean. I made a video about this process, make sure to check it out. It's nothing really hard, it's just like playing with Legos, breaking something is very difficult. After cleaning everything, it's time to get this Xbox One Elite set, that includes the thumbsticks and the D-pad. I got it from Extreme Rate, make sure to check their website out, since they have a lot of cool stuff. The first thing that we need to do is to trim the D-pad base, since it won't fit in the controller. For this, I'm just using some pliers. After cutting it, it fits perfectly. Now we have to widen the D-pad hole, since the magnetic piece doesn't fit. This time I'll be way more precise than last time. I'm placing the magnetic piece on some tape, drawing its shape with a pencil, cutting the shape, placing the tape on the controller and start filing down the hole. This time I'm using this set of files that I bought for really cheap, about $5. After filing everything, the D-pad fits perfectly and the hole is way cleaner than last time. Now it's time to install the thumbsticks. I just place a piece of paper inside to make sure that they have the right height and push them on the motherboard. They require some strength, but it's not that hard. Now we just need some custom buttons. I got these beautiful metal ones, also from Extreme Rate. They came in a kit that included all of the pieces for a brand new controller, minus the shell. Rubber pads, screws, springs and everything. All of this stuff is going to come in handy. Before closing the controller, we need to finish the D-pad piece. We have to cut an original D-pad, glue the new one on top, and file down the pin at the bottom, using an original one as reference, to make sure that it works. Now we close everything, using the Extreme Rate parts, and I can say that we've improved quite a bit from the last time. The hole is way more precise, and the shiny buttons look great. Before continuing, I noticed that the old controller thumbsticks were shinier. I have no idea why, since it should be the same exact product, so I'm going to swap them, and I think that both the controllers look way better now. Then, I tried soldering the Model U. However, I changed my soldering iron, and didn't notice that it was set to a temperature that was way too high, and, unfortunately, I destroyed the contact pads. This means that the controller is basically unusable, and only good for replacement parts. While writing the script for this video, I found out that it is fixable. However, when recording this video, I didn't know it. I also started doubting on how good the video would have been. It's just the same controller with more precise cuts in the shell. Why would it be interesting? I requested the buttons and thumbsticks only for this project, but I wasn't sure if the video would even come out, since I really thought about giving up on the project. But then, after a couple of days, I decided to pull myself together. I bought another controller and decided to take this project to the next level. I think we can all agree on the fact that the USB-C port, aside from being cool, is pretty pointless, since it only works for a specific cable and doesn't work on normal USB devices. But what if it was possible to make the controller work as a regular Gamecube controller when plugged into a Gamecube or an adapter, and as a USB controller when plugged into a PC? So, here comes the fun part. I've decided to contact Crane, since I knew that he was the right guy. For those who don't know, Crane makes custom box controllers that work as both the USB and Gamecube controllers. He's also the guy that designed the Model U board that I'm using right now. I'm leaving a link to his website, Github, and YouTube channel in the description. He was super helpful and told me how the project could be done. He found a board that was small enough to fit in the controller's handle, that also had the USB pins broken out. The SparkFun Pro Micro RP2040. He also sent me a wiring diagram. The idea is that the board gets powered by the 5V line that is used for the rumble motor, while the controller is always powered on. The board reads the input from the controller, translates it and sends it back to the GameCube or to the computer. It would also be possible to make the left Z button that I want to add work as a regular L1 button on PC and as a configurable button on GameCube. All of the other buttons would also be completely remappable. The hardware stuff was clear, but what about the software? Crane redirected me to the right guy, Haystack, the creator of the HeBox firmware using most box controllers. He was also kind enough to explain me what to do, and even sent me a firmware to use as a base. Okay, I just talked with Haystack. He was very kind and decided to help me, and he sent me some code to use as a base. So let's get to work. I wired the board according to Crane's diagram, and the finished product was starting to take shape. I finally got something working. If I plug the controller in a normal USB-C cable connected to my computer, should... Okay, green light means that it booted. Okay, here it is. But if I connect it to a GameCube controller adapter or Wii or a GameCube using a USB-C to GameCube cable, you can see that. Blue light means it's in GameCube mode, and it's connected. After making sure that the board was getting recognized as both a GameCube and USB controller, it was time to solder it to the controller. Before doing that, I had to make an hole in the shell to make the port fit. I used the files once again and tried to be as precise as possible. After doing that, I soldered the Model U and the board to the controller following the diagram, and this time it went pretty smoothly. After the last time, I was pretty scared to try it, but after plugging in the adapter...
Sì! Funziona!
Now it was time to prepare for the second Z button. I found a guide on how to do that I'll leave in the description. However, instead of wiring the button to the controller, I'm wiring it to the board. I'm also wiring the normal Z button directly to the board, so that it will be easier to control the board without opening everything up. At the time I was still writing the firmware, and I didn't find a way to make the board read the controller inputs as soon as it was plugged in. As you will see in the video, I found a way to do it, but keep in mind that, if you are trying to do this, wiring the right Z button separately is completely pointless. Just hit for the additional Z button if you want to try it. Anyways, I'm using these buttons that I found on AliExpress. They are really cheap, ship pretty fast, have the perfect feel, and don't require any modifications to fit the board. I then followed the guide that included trimming the motherboard and making a hole in the shell. I used a drill and the files, and I think that I got a pretty good result. It's not quite perfect, but I'm really happy with it. Now it was time to glue the buttons to the board, using some epoxy resin, and I could finally close everything. However, there was a problem. The GameCube mode worked fine, but the USB mode had some problems. The board couldn't read the controller inputs at all. I modified the firmware so that the LED built on the board will change color by pressing the A or B button. It worked when the controller was in GameCube mode, but not in USB mode. This was very weird. It could not have been a wiring problem since the controller works and the board gets recognized and can even send inputs. I could have easily left the controller like this, since a GameCube controller with a custom firmware was already cool enough, but everything was so odd. Haystack said that it could have been an hardware issue and suggested to use a resistor, but I really wasn't sure about why. I searched a bit on the internet to see if someone tried doing something similar before, and I found it. This person made a GameCube controller to switch adapter, using an RP2040 based board just like mine, and looking through the GitHub page, bingo! The missing piece to the puzzle was a pull-up resistor, which is a resistor used to ensure a defined logical level at a pin. And apparently, the GameCube controller alone just isn't able to set the input pin's state if it isn't connected to a GameCube. So I bought some 1K ohm resistors and set the firmware up so that, when the controller was getting recognized by the board, the LED would turn white. After getting some results, I tried to solder it. Even though the LED didn't fully turn white, something was definitely happening. So I pressed the A button and...
Yes! Yes!
Before finishing the firmware, it was time to close everything. It was honestly very difficult, but eventually managed to do it. It was helpful to remove the two brackets that covered the triggers. It obviously changes the feeling a bit, but since it's the only way to close everything, it's not a big deal. Also, it doesn't really move or damage the cables at all. Now I had to finish the firmware, and after some time I was left with... This is probably the most proud I've ever been of something I made. The controller looks, feels and works great. Just like last time, it's heavier than a regular controller, and unfortunately, the sticks have a bit more snapback than usual. However, this is meant to be a fun project and not a competitive beast. Maybe I'll try to make this again, but with regular Gamecube controller sticks and D-pad. When plugged into a Gamecube, a Wii or an adapter, it enters Gamecube mode, where it acts as a regular Gamecube controller. When plugged into a PC, it enters the input mode. It will get recognized by most emulators and games. Then, when plugging it into a PC, you can enter different modes using some button combinations. When plugged into a PC and holding X, it enters X input mode, another input mode used by many games and emulators. I've not set it as a default mode because it isn't compatible with Macs, and for this reason I haven't been able to test it that much. When holding Z, it enters keyboard mode, that makes the controller work as a regular keyboard, so that you can use it for games that don't support controllers. You can download the firmware for free from the link in the description. It's very easy to customize, and I'd be more than happy if some of you made some modifications, since I'm pretty sure it's not really optimized. It's also possible to add other buttons, such as back buttons, but I wasn't sure that I could make them comfortable, and I thought that a left Z button was already enough. I have to give massive thanks to Crane and Haystack. They spent a lot of time helping me. Make sure to check their projects. One last thing that we could talk about is the price. Assuming that you have a Gamecube controller, which, by the way, costs about $30, you can buy the SparkFun Pro Micro RP2040 for about $15, depending on where you live. You have to order the Model U board from JLCPCB, which I paid $15 including shipping, but it was a batch of 5. The tactile buttons cost less than $2, and Gamecube controller buttons also cost less than $2 when bought on AliExpress, or about $15 if you buy them from Extreme Rate, but they come with a lot of additional pieces. The most pricey thing is the Elite Controller kit, which costs about $25. Keep in mind that the prices may vary according to where you live, but turning a Gamecube controller into an hybrid USB one costs about $30, and turning it into a full Gamecube Elite controller costs about $70, or $60 if you opt for the cheaper buttons. Anyways, I think that we can call this project a complete success, and I'm really happy with how everything turned out. If you like this video, leave a like and subscribe. I'd be very happy if you left a comment, and even more if you try to build this mod yourself. And, as I said in the beginning, feel free to contact me if you need some help. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.